Good morning, everyone. I want to thank you for taking the time to join us today. It's now 10 a.m., so we'll go ahead and get started with the workshop. Welcome to the public workshop for retailers and distributors, safer consumer products regulations, and you. My name is Danielle Gilstrap, and I serve as a public participation specialist in the Office of Environmental Equity at the Department of Toxic Substances Control, which we're going to refer to as DTSC throughout today's presentation. This workshop is being recorded, and by joining, you agree to be recorded. The workshop is scheduled from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. However, if we're able to answer everyone's questions before 12 p.m., we may end early. If we reach the end of the workshop and we're not able to get to all of the questions, you can email additional questions to saferconsumerproducts@dtsc.ca.gov. We've also dropped that email address into the chat box for you. The purpose of today's workshop is to provide information on retailers' duty to comply with safer consumer product regulations. Following the presentation, we're going to take questions and feedback from our audience. Please note, PowerPoint presentation and the recording of this workshop will be available for you to review at our Safer Consumer Products webpage at dtsc.ca.gov/SCP/Safer Consumer Products Workshops Events. We also shared that link earlier in the chat for you. Next slide, please. Now I'll go over a few logistics. You're in a listen and participation role. Automatic closed captions have been turned on. If you'd like to follow along with the closed captions, please click on the CC button on the toolbar at the bottom of your screen. Please note, we will not be taking questions through the chat feature today. This feature is only going to be used for sharing links and helpful information with you. Today we will be taking questions through the Q&A feature and raised hands. Please click on the Q&A button on the toolbar at the bottom of your screen when you would like to send us a question. You can send us your questions throughout the workshop, and we'll respond to them during the Q&A session after the presentation. You can send us as many questions as you want, but we do ask that you send them one at a time, so that way we can respond to each one fully. Additionally, we'll be taking questions via raised hands. Please wait until the end of the presentation to raise your hand. And for those of you who might be joining us by phone today, you can press *9 to raise your hand to let us know you have a question. And when we call on you and prompt you to unmute yourself, you can press *6. We'll do our best to respond to the questions in the order that they're received today. Finally, please note that our presenters are hosting this workshop from different locations. Please bear with us if there are any time lags, pauses, or technical difficulties. We appreciate your patience, understanding, and cooperation in making our workshop a success. Next slide, please. This is our agenda for today's workshop. First, Robin Christensen, our Deputy Director of the Safer Consumer Products Program, will provide a welcome and opening remarks. Then, Jesse Valdez, our Hazardous Substances Engineer, will present on retailers and distributors' potential duty to comply with regulations. After the presentation, we'll have a Q&A session to respond to your questions. That's your opportunity to ask questions for our panel to address today. Finally, Rob Rushia, our Senior Environmental Scientist, will see us out with closing remarks. I just want to say a thank you to all of our panelists for your time and dedication in being here today. And without further ado, please welcome our Deputy Director, Robin Christensen. Over to you, Robin.
Thank you so much, Danielle. And many thanks to everyone who's here today, and you've taken time out of your morning to learn more about our program. I'd like to take a minute now to orient you to the Department of Toxic Substances Control, or DTSC, and the Safer Consumer Products Program. The DTSC mission is to protect California's people, communities, and environment from toxic substances, to enhance economic vitality by restoring contaminated land, and to compel manufacturers to make safer consumer products. Now, DTSC is a large department, and there are numerous programs that are working in different ways to accomplish this mission. DTSC carries out numerous laws to accomplish its mission and goals, some of which may affect your organization. And you may be familiar with some of these, such as the prohibition on heavy metals in children's jewelry, or more recent bills that ban PFAS in certain products. And since DTSC's purview is quite broad, we wanted to set the stage today for the conversation and what we are here to talk to you about. Today's focus is on the Safer Consumer Products Program, which is a very unique program. You'll hear me say SCP when I talk about the program. SCP's scope does not include these other laws or some of the more recent product chemical prohibition laws, though our staff do help occasionally on some of these other laws given our subject matter expertise in consumer products. SCP's mission is to advance the design, the development, and the use of products that are chemically safer for people and the environment. Now, how do we do this? Well, broadly, we work to reduce potentially harmful chemicals in consumer products by requiring manufacturers to look for safer alternatives to the use of potentially harmful chemicals in their products. Next slide, please. Thank you. Since we all buy and use consumer products, we anticipate that you also share in this goal and want to ensure the products that you sell are as safe as possible for people and the environment. And that's why we've reached out to you. We want to work to identify ways in which we can mutually benefit one another. For SCP, we've found that early engagement and relationship building is often more successful than a more command and control type approach. So first today, we're going to share an overview of our program so that you better understand your role in our process and how we can help one another. Next slide. There. We also want to establish relationships with you and a two-way communication pathway. As you'll hear from my team, SCP was established to work with manufacturers who control product formulations and the supply chains. However, that work can be quite challenging. It's also within our scope to work with retailers and distributors, and we want to work with you to connect with your supply chain and manufacturers, and then establish relationships with them. You'll hear how helping us can help you to avoid a duty to comply with our laws. We will be providing contact information for staff and other ways to connect, such as subscribing to our e-list where we make important announcements. Next slide. And we hope that by understanding your role and how our program works, you will engage early in our process as we start to evaluate the products that you sell. I want to end just by saying, again, we're thankful that you're here today, and we hope that we can work with you. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jesse. Thanks.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jesse. I'm a hazardous substances engineer here at SCP. Now, before I continue, I just wanted to start off by talking about who's included when we say retailers and distributors. Retailers and distributors are any entity that purchases a product for the purpose of sale in California. This means anyone who sells a product or distributes a product for sale in California, whether that be at a brick and mortar store or online. I also want to point out that in some cases, a retailer, under our definition, might include a manufacturer or a brand. Your industry might use different terms, so please reach out if you're unsure about where you fall within our regulations. As Robin noted, I'll be talking about the Safer Consumer Products Program, which is its own law and set of regulations, distinct from the other laws and regulations shown here. How to comply with and how we enforce SCP regulations is not necessarily the same as how you may comply with and how DTSC would enforce other laws and regulations, such as recently passed bills banning certain chemicals and products. Since DTSC's scope is so broad, I can imagine this is a bit confusing, so we just wanted to make it clear that everything we're discussing today is only for the Safer Consumer Products regulations. The Safer Consumer Products Program's goal is to reduce exposure to toxins by encouraging manufacturers to identify safer alternatives to harmful chemicals in their products. The way we accomplish this is through the regulatory framework that's laid out here. I'll go over a high-level summary of each of these steps in hopes that you'll understand how we can work together to provide safer products to consumers in California. One unique quality of the SCP program is that we use a precautionary principle. That means we don't necessarily need to show how exposure to a chemical has caused harm, rather just that the exposure to the chemical has the potential to cause harm to humans or the environment. Our first step is to consider chemicals that are included in our candidate chemicals list. There are approximately 3,300 chemicals or chemical classes on the candidate chemicals list. The candidate chemicals list comes from multiple lists of chemicals from 23 authoritative bodies, and we may add additional chemicals to the list as new information becomes available. One way that your organization could use our candidate chemicals list is to create or update your own restricted substances lists by adding some of these chemicals or checking to see if chemicals you're considering for your restricted substances lists are already on our list. To help shape our focus at SCP, we consider candidate chemicals that are included in consumer products that fit into the categories listed in our priority product work plan. The candidate chemicals list is updated quarterly. Our priority product work plan is a list of all the product categories we'll be looking into to potentially regulate over the next 3-year period. In general, we'll only regulate products that fall within a product category in the work plan. This is a good place to go to see if there are any product categories for products that you sell that might be regulated in the near future. The work plan itself doesn't identify any priority products, nor does it create any new regulatory requirements. One of the fundamental ideas behind the work plan is that it's a tool for us at SCP to be as transparent as possible on where we will be focusing our regulatory efforts. Throughout the development of this work plan, there is opportunity for public comment before finalization through the Priority Product Work Plan workshop or the formal comment period. This would be a great opportunity for you to provide comment to us to help shape where we focus our efforts. We encourage you to sign up for our e-list to learn about those opportunities as they come up. We'll have a link for you at the end. We'll have a public comment period and workshop when we post a draft for our next work plan. We're trying something new this time around by engaging with various industry leaders before drafting the 2027 to 2029 work plan. Additionally, our Safer Consumer Products timeline is updated quarterly with all the projects we are currently working on and at what step we are in that project. We'll provide links for all the websites shown in the follow-up email after the presentation. We've gone over the candidate chemicals list and the work plan. Now, when we determine that there are potential public or environmental exposures to the candidate chemical in the product, and that there's a potential for one or more of those exposures to contribute to or cause significant or widespread impacts, then we may place those product chemical combinations on a regulatory list called the Priority Products List. This is the precautionary principle I mentioned when I first introduced the regulatory framework. I want to make it very clear that the act of listing a product as a priority product is not a sales prohibition. It just means that we now move on to the next steps of our regulatory framework. There are numerous opportunities for public engagement at this step, including workshops and public comment periods during the initial screening phase, on the profile document itself, and during the legal process of listing a priority product into our regulations. I also want to take a moment to further clarify what a priority product listing looks like. These are the priority products we currently have listed. As you can see, it is a specific product type with a specific chemical. The chemical is a candidate chemical. However, at this stage in the process, we now refer to these chemicals as chemicals of concern. If you're interested in any of these particular products, our website has a lot of information and we encourage you to look there. We'll add another link in the chat. When products are added to the priority products list, it triggers certain regulatory requirements. One of those requirements could be an alternatives analysis where the manufacturer of a product evaluates safer alternatives to the chemical of concern in their priority product. We hope that all manufacturers engage in this process because the goal of this step is to provide safer products to consumers. We do this with the idea that an alternatives analysis will thoroughly evaluate the potential impacts of the chemical of concern and any potential alternatives and identify the trade-offs between the chemical of concern and those alternatives. The key to this step is getting manufacturers engaged. And the way retailers and distributors can engage in this step is by encouraging manufacturers they buy the priority products from to engage in our process. Additionally, at this point, instead of doing alternatives analyses, many manufacturers opt to remove the chemical of concern from their product through reformulation or even just stop producing the product. So that might mean that retailers are seeing different products on the shelves or products are just being discontinued. The next step in this process is our regulatory response. There are different regulatory responses DTSC can take to protect human health and the environment. For example, we can require additional information on packaging or even enforce a sales prohibition. Many of our regulatory responses are specific to manufacturers and not retailers or distributors. Next, let's go over who's responsible for what within our regulations. We think of this sort of like a pyramid, with the manufacturers of the priority product on the top. They always have the primary duty to comply with the SCP regulations. If the manufacturer of a priority product fails to comply, their product will be added to a failure to comply list. And when that happens, DTSC may notify retailers or distributors that they have a duty to comply. SCP was really created to work upstream of retailers, with a smaller group of priority product manufacturers, because they're the ones that are making the products. However, it's not always easy for us to find out who's making something or who's responsible for a formulation. That's where retailers and distributors can be very helpful. We want to encourage you to engage early in our process and leverage existing relationships with manufacturers to get them engaged in our process, so we don't have to come to you with enforcement. Let's say your business that both controls the manufacturing of a product and sells it. Where do you fall in this pyramid? We understand that sometimes a retailer might also be an importer or manufacturer, and these definitions are not necessarily the same for every industry. You may consider yourself a manufacturer, an importer, a brand, or a retailer or distributor, etc., but you may meet one or both of the definitions for manufacturers and retailers. Well, broadly speaking, we consider a manufacturer to be anyone who controls the ingredients of a product, and retailers or distributors to be anyone who sells a product to a consumer in California. Manufacturers always have the primary duty to comply, and we expect them to be proactive in our process. If they don't, the duty to comply may fall to retailers and distributors. If you meet both definitions, you'll have the primary duty to comply as a manufacturer. The important thing to note here is that we will notify a retailer or distributor if they have a duty to comply. Say a manufacturer fails to comply with the regulations. The duty to comply may now fall to retailers and distributors. You essentially have two options for compliance. You, as retailers and or distributors, can perform the alternatives analysis for manufacturers, evaluating alternative chemicals to use in lieu of the candidate chemical in their products to try to identify a safer alternative. This is a time-consuming, resource-intensive, and expensive process. Alternatively, the other option would be to cease ordering the non-compliant product. Because conducting alternatives analysis is generally aimed at having a product manufacturer evaluate different ways to produce the product, SCP recognizes retailers will most likely opt to cease ordering non-compliant products and notify DTSC. A manufacturer may make multiple products, but you're only required to comply when it comes to products on our failure to comply list. But like I said before, we'll notify you if you have a duty to comply with our regulations with the options for compliance. Sometimes, we'll also need to conduct product testing. This means we'll need to come to your stores or websites to purchase products. Ultimately, we hope to build relationships with you all. Please feel free to reach out to us with any questions you might have here. By now, you've heard me mention our website and the failure to comply list a number of times. Here's how we get there. This is the homepage of our website, CalSafer. At the bottom left is the link to the failure to comply list. The failure to comply list identifies all non-compliant products. Products can be non-compliant for different reasons. A moment ago, I mentioned compliance options for manufacturers. If they don't pursue one of those options, then their products may end up on this list. I would just like to point out that products not on our failure to comply list aren't necessarily safer. It's just that the manufacturers of those products are engaging in our process. Now that we've spent some time looking at our program, the next few slides are a summary and some actionable items that we're hoping you can take away from this webinar. We'll take another look at our candidate chemicals list, the priority product work plan, priority products, and our e-list. First off, review our candidate chemicals list. Retailers and distributors have a choice of what products they buy. You can encourage manufacturers to make ingredient lists more transparent. Use the candidate chemicals list as a potential source for restricted substances lists, or to help develop or implement a corporate chemical policy. Now, let's take a look at it. Let's go back to the homepage of our website, CalSafer. We'll link it in the chat momentarily. The icon at the right of the banner at the top will take us to the candidate chemicals list. With over 3,000 results, it can be quite a hassle to navigate, so we would suggest that you export the list as an Excel spreadsheet if you intend to use it similarly to a restricted substances list. Another way to navigate this list is by using the built-in filters. If you click on the Advanced button, it'll bring up a list of filters so you can customize your search. If you were planning to update your restricted substances list or create one of the filters you might want to use would be filtering by hazard traits. If your company is interested in avoiding all carcinogens, for example, you can filter the whole candidate chemicals list down to just show chemicals that are listed for carcinogenicity. After you've selected your relevant filters, just click on Update Results, and the list of chemicals below will refresh with your desired criteria. And here's that updated list that you can now export as an Excel file. Please remember that we update the CC list quarterly, so you may want to check in periodically. We invite you to engage early in our process when we start to evaluate products. I encourage you to look at our current work plan, which spans now through 2026. Right now, there's an opportunity to provide input into our next work plan. The QR code will take you to a website where you'll be able to provide input for our upcoming work plan. We're hoping that you can help us by establishing a link between us and manufacturers. We also hope that you can help us encourage manufacturers to look for safer alternatives to potentially harmful chemicals in their products, especially once a priority product is listed and the alternatives analysis portion begins. Lastly, sign up for our e-blast list so that you can stay informed and check out our timeline of current projects. We'll send a link in the chat. Attend workshops and provide comments so we can more effectively provide safer products to consumers. We welcome you to meet with us one-on-one so we can establish a relationship, learn how we can support your efforts to provide safer products to consumers, and how you can support our mission. If you would like to learn more, head to our SCP website or CalSafer. You can also email our program inbox or myself if you have any questions or if you'd just like to talk to us. We'll follow up with everyone here with an email with all of the links mentioned today, including a quick survey. Now, on to Q&A.
Thank you, Jesse. This concludes the presentation portion of today's workshop. Once again, please check back at our Safer Consumer Products webpage within 2 to 3 weeks for a copy of the PowerPoint and the recording at dtsc.ca.gov/scp/Safer Consumer Products Workshops Events. And we put that link in the chat earlier. We will now begin the Q&A portion of this workshop. As a reminder, we will not be taking questions by the chat feature. As mentioned previously, if you would like to send us a question, please click on the Q&A button on the toolbar at the bottom of your screen. You can send us as many questions as you want, but we do ask that you send them one at a time so that we can respond to each one fully. For those joining by phone today, you can press *9 to raise your hand to let us know you have a question. And when we call on you to unmute yourself, you can press *6. Okay, let's go ahead and begin. Please send us your questions through the Q&A or raise your hand. While we're giving you a few minutes to type, I will just say a few friendly reminders. As I mentioned, the PowerPoint presentation and the recording of this workshop will be available for review at the Safer Consumer Products webpage at dtsc.ca.gov/scp/Safer Consumer Products Workshops Events. That link is in the chat from a little earlier in our presentation. Going to give another few minutes for folks to share some questions. And I see we did just receive our first question. So, panelists, this question comes from Peter, who says, does DTSC use the precautionary principle? If not, how does DTSC prevent dangerous products from coming into the marketplace?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Rob Brish, and I supervise the compliance and enforcement program at Safer Consumer Products Program, and I'll be answering as many of these questions as I can. So I will address the first question, Danielle. Yes, DTSC uses a precautionary principle. What we mean by that is that in our determination, you heard Jesse say that we need to make a determination that there are significant or widespread exposures to a chemical, and that those exposures have the potential to cause significant or widespread harm. And when we find a product with that chemical in it, we list them as a priority product if we can make those two determinations. Potential is the thing that I wanted to raise to your attention. The reg requires that there is a potential for harm, a potential for exposure. That, in effect, is the precautionary principle. We don't have to prove that something is occurring or has occurred. We have to make a determination that it's likely to occur based on the information available to us. And so I think that answers your question. You did ask if not, which I said we do, but regardless, I'll just try to address the second part of your question too. If not, how does DTSC prevent dangerous products from coming into the marketplace? We want to be really clear here that this program is not designed in a way to rapidly respond to issues regarding the dangers that chemicals pose in products. So, for example, if a product was out on the market that was causing imminent harm to people, there may be a different path to address it. Our program is more long-term. What we're asking manufacturers to do is to take a look at these chemicals that we identify in their respective products that we identify and to see if there's a safer alternative. We don't remove products from the market necessarily. We may get to that point at some time during our process, but that's not the purpose of our program. When we list a priority product, it's not a sales prohibition. There's no restriction on its sales so long as the manufacturer of that product is participating in our process to look at safer alternatives. That is a process. It takes time to work through. Retailers are free to keep selling the product while that process is going on. So I just want to make that really clear. When we list a product, it is not a sales prohibition, and we don't typically move to prohibit the sales of products first. That's a sort of different kind of issue when you're faced with an imminent threat situation. So I hope that answers your question. If you have additional questions, feel free to type them into the chat.
Great. Thank you, Rob. Okay, we will give folks another few minutes to collect their thoughts and type any questions that they have. Now, we don't have any open at the moment. And as a friendly reminder, if you would like to ask us a question, you can either use the Q&A feature by clicking on that button that says Q&A in the toolbar at the bottom of your screen in Zoom, or you can raise your hand if you would like to speak your question out loud. And for anyone who has dialed in by phone today, you can press *9, and that will show us that you're raising your hand. Okay, while we wait, just a couple of other friendly reminders for folks who are still here with us. If you think of any questions after the workshop ends, you can always email us at saferconsumerproducts@dtsc.ca.gov, and we put that email address and contact info into the chat for you. So please feel free to reach out with any questions or thoughts if you think of anything after the webinar is complete today. I see a follow-up question from Peter. So he says, thank you for the response. He clarifies that my question is more about prevention versus reaction. It seems that DTSC is mostly working on products that are already in the marketplace And he's wondering if there's a way to prevent products from ever coming into the marketplace before they become a problem.
Well, okay, so the Safer Consumer Products Program itself does not. That's beyond the scope of our regulatory authority. So the answer is we don't do that. In other words, we don't require manufacturers to submit safety data to us, and we evaluate the safety, sort of analogous to like the FDA might do, or other federal agencies might do. We don't do that. You're indeed correct that we are working on products that are already in the marketplace, products that people are using, that are in their homes, that may contain one or more of these chemicals that we're concerned about, and those are the ones that we're asking manufacturers to step back and see if there's a better way to make those products that they're already selling. That is absolutely correct. In terms of, is there a way to prevent products from ever coming into the marketplace before they become a problem? Like I said, that's not within the scope of our regulatory authority. We don't do that. There are various programs at the federal level or some at the state level that do regulate specific categories of products in that way. And I know that the legislature has been working on more and more prohibitions on the uses of certain chemicals and products in an attempt to basically do what you're saying, prevent an issue before they ever reach the market. But we don't have the scope to do that currently. That's beyond the scope of our regulatory authority. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you for that answer, Rob. Peter also says thank you.
You're welcome. No problem.
Okay, we'll give it another few minutes if anyone else would like to ask any questions. And of course, Peter, if you have any additional questions, you are more than welcome to ask them. In the meantime, another friendly reminder, after our webinar ends today, you will have the option to take a survey and send us any thoughts and feedback about the webinar that you joined today. And we will also be reaching out via email after the webinar is over to share many of the helpful resources that we mentioned during the webinar today. So keep an eye on your email inbox. Checking for any questions. It looks like we don't have any at the moment that are open. I would just like to give folks another couple of minutes so that you can think back about the presentation and collect your thoughts, type out any questions that you have. So please go ahead and let us know either in the Q&A box or by raising your hand. Just checking to see if we've received any more questions. It looks like, oh, we just received one. Okay. So this one comes from Ivan. Ivan says, I might have missed it, but how is safer defined? Also, is there a standard in terms of alternatives? For instance, one company's alternative substance might be appropriate for that company, but this may not be the case for another company that uses the same substance, but for a different function.
Okay. First of all, let me address safer. In fact, it's not defined, and that's because when a company or manufacturer undergoes an alternatives analysis as part of our process, it's really sort of up to them currently to define what they mean by safer and to evaluate potential alternatives. We are currently talking about this issue, but we currently don't have any definitions cited for what is meant by safer. Rather, we have a lot of guidance on how to do the alternatives analysis process, and it's an extensive process that takes companies quite a bit of time to do. In fact, the overall process, I think, takes, year and a half, 2 years to work through the entire alternatives analysis process. There are some middle requirements and so forth at various times during the process. But in that process, there are factors that the entity doing the analysis have to consider that are required by our regulations. Again, we have extensive guidance manuals and things online that help folks do the alternative analysis and point out to them specifically all of the things they need to take into consideration when they're doing that. But as you can imagine, there are chemicals that are carcinogens and chemicals that are endocrine disruptors and chemicals that are reproductive toxicants. So what is safer may mean something different, depending on what chemical you're dealing with, what specific products you're dealing with, and so on. And so, like I said, right now we don't have a definition for the term safer. Rather, it's achieved via going through the process and considering all the factors that we require you to consider. And in terms of, is there a standard in terms of alternatives? Well, there's our regulatory standard. Our regulations really do spell out what the alternatives analysis is supposed to contain, all the information is supposed to be considered. And again, on our website, our public website, we have an extensive amount of guidance material available to entities that have to do these alternatives analysis. And your last question is absolutely correct, and we acknowledge that. The alternatives analysis literally can turn out differently for every single manufacturer that's engaging in the process, depending, on that manufacturer specific considerations that they put into the process. And we can have different outcomes. And at the end of our process, Jesse briefly mentioned it. We didn't go into it because it's not really the purpose of this webinar. And it also really doesn't necessarily apply to retailers, but we have this option, this menu of options called regulatory responses that we can impose upon a product depending on the outcome, on each specific outcome of the alternatives analysis process. So if two different manufacturers have different outcomes, one of them might get a different regulatory response at the end than the other. And again, this is a menu of things we can choose from that ranges from requiring manufacturers to provide additional safety information to users to actually at the other extreme end is if we can make certain determinations, we can actually prohibit the sale of a product during the regulatory response phase. And then there's a whole slew of different options in between those two extremes. So, and you might, take a look at the Safer Consumer Product Regulations for more information, or if you have additional questions, you can ask them. But I think I've addressed that. I hope I have. But yeah, we do acknowledge that the outcome can be different for different manufacturers. And thank you for your question.
Thank you, Rob. We have received a couple more questions.
Uh-huh.
Our next one comes from Nathaniel, who says, product chemical restrictions often directly compete with other major priorities, such as recycling and/or product durability. For an example, see California Senate Bill 707. How is DTSC thinking about these issues with respect to SCP regulations? Would recycled materials potentially be treated differently than virgin materials as SB 707 is implemented over time?
That's a good question. Thank you. So how is DTSC thinking about this? Let me get to that first. Really, this type of thing is considered during our product evaluation process. So in our process, Jesse laid out the framework for our regulations. There are 4 parts to it: the candidate chemicals list and priority products list. We're at the top, and so we evaluate products that contain one or more of the chemicals on our candidate chemical list, and we have to make certain determinations, like we alluded to, and then we list them. During that process of evaluating the chemical, that's where specific things like its recycled content and other considerations can be taken into account. On our candidate chemical list is just a list of chemicals, right? That has really no bearing on anyone or doesn't require any action on anyone until we identify a product as a priority product that contains one or more of those chemicals. So that process of evaluating the chemical would take into consideration a lot of things. Even the availability of potential safer alternatives to the use of the chemical might be an important factor in deciding whether or not we list a product as a priority product. So that's where those kinds of things like, recycled content and impact on recycling streams may come into the process, or may be part of our process, considering those things. And then in terms of would recycled materials potentially be treated differently than virgin materials, I'm not familiar with SB 707 personally, and so I can't really address what is not in that bill. But what I can say is we don't have a provision that calls out specific exclusions or exemptions or other considerations that would apply to recycled materials. What we look at is whether or not the chemical is in a product. And if that chemical was introduced into that product via recycling stream, that may be relevant information for us, but it doesn't impact our ability to still list that product as a priority product potentially. Again, during that product evaluation phase, this is why Jesse, during his presentation, was really encouraging everyone to participate in our process, to sign up for our e-listserv. All that is we send out announcements when major things happen here at DTSC. So for example, if we are considering listing a new product, chemical combination, as a priority product, you would get information on that, and you would be invited to, and via the e-listserv, you would be invited to attend, workshops. We hold pre-rulemaking workshops where we allow the public an opportunity to comment. We also host written public comment periods where we allow you, the public, or anyone who's interested to comment on our proposals. And so you have an opportunity to take a look at the reasoning that goes into our proposal to list a given chemical and product combination, and you have an opportunity to weigh in on that. And you can raise concerns, things that may, impact recycling networks and so forth. You can certainly raise those concerns at that time, and we will certainly consider concerns that are raised. So I hope that answers your question. Once it gets to me, it's already been listed as a priority product, and my purpose is to be out there making sure that manufacturers are complying with our regulations. So I'm not necessarily, my unit's not necessarily involved in that product selection process, but it is what our program does. So we do encourage you to participate. Thanks for your question.
Thank you, Rob. I do see we have a hand up. Ivan, I'm going to go ahead and allow you to unmute yourself. Please go ahead and unmute yourself and say your question. Ivan, if you're speaking, I'm afraid we're not able to hear you. You might need to check if your microphone has a manual mute button.
I think. Am I speaking all right?
Yes, we can hear you now, Ivan. You can go ahead and state your question for the panelists.
Are you able to hear me all right?
Yes, we can hear you, Ivan. Please go ahead.
Oh, okay. I think, hang on.
Okay, we'll give Ivan just a second.
Let me try this. Is this better?
Yes, we can hear you clearly. Please go ahead.
Still not.
We'll go ahead and give Ivan just another moment to fix any audio issues that they're having. It looks like Ivan may have left. So if Ivan comes back, we will go ahead. Oh, there you are. I'm so sorry, Ivan. You dropped off my radar. Do you still have a question you would like to ask?
Mute. All right. Is this better? Yes.
Yes, we can hear you. Can you hear us?
I switched to the actual app. So a question that I was trying to type, but maybe it's easier to ask, was I wonder how the TSC is or will be viewing polymers. And part of that is because looking at the list of candidate chemicals, it doesn't seem to include polymers. But as perhaps already been alluded in the previous question, microplastic would be a topic that presumably citizens would be interested in getting some regulation. And so in view of what might be coming in the future, like if polymers are listed as ingredients, how would the DTSC Safer Consumer Product Program deal with that? Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for your question, Ivan. Interestingly, we just so happen to be in the process of adding microplastics to our candidate chemical list in terms of your question about polymers, which are polymers. And we're actually undergoing that process right now. We've already had workshops on that. Again, this is thank you, Justin. Justin put a link in there to our microplastics, to information on that process that we're undergoing right now. In general, polymer is not real well defined, and so really it sort of depends on the composition of the polymer, whether or not it contains specific chemicals that are on our candidate chemical list that comprise part of the polymer or something like that. We could address it, and we're looking at microplastics, like I said, and adding those to the candidate chemical list, and so. We have a mechanism to address polymers if we need to, but candidate chemicals, microplastics may be one of the first polymers that we're adding to our list. I honestly don't know if there's another polymer on the list, to be honest with you, because I haven't looked at all 30,000 whatever chemicals that are on the list. But so I hope that answers your question. We have the ability to add chemicals to our candidate chemical list. If we find there's a reason to do that, and so that's what we're doing. Like right now, like I said, it's actually a regulatory process. We have to do a rulemaking to add them to our candidate chemical list. But microplastics are not the only chemicals we're currently proposing adding to our list, and our list also actually undergoes automatic quarterly updates. So our list was created from a bunch of other authoritative lists that have been published. And those lists from time to time are updated. For example, like the Prop 65 list in California. When that happens, our list automatically gets updated to incorporate those changes. So that's another way that things can be added to the list. So I hope that addresses your question. If specific polymers come to our attention as a problem, then we might look at that and we might consider regulating them. But right now, we don't have anything in specific in our plans other than adding microplastics right now, and then we'll then we can look at products that may contain microplastics, for example, down the road. So I hope that answers your question. If you have any additional things to ask, just go ahead and feel free.
Thank you, Rob. We do have another question in the Q&A. This one comes from Peter. Peter says, can DTSC regulate a whole group, type, category of chemicals that may be in many products? For example, I've heard that in Europe, over 6,000 chemicals in the PFAS category have been banned, whereas only about 6 of those have been banned in the USA. If DTSC has to go through and consider each of those 6,000 chemicals and do extensive research on each, it may be a never-ending task that would not protect human health and the environment.
Thank you for the question. Yes is the answer. We can address whole classes, and we have. We have listed products containing PFASs, and we've listed PFAS as a class. And we've noted many times in literature and in public meetings that our list, our candidate chemical list, does capture families of chemicals. And in fact, we've even gone so far, phthalates are another example of a family of chemicals that are captured on our list. We've also gone so far as to inform the regulated community that when we capture a class, we capture all structurally related chemicals in that class at one time, whether or not specific ones are even on our candidate chemical list. And when we listed, we listed PFASs in carpets and rugs, and we listed PFASs or treatments for converted textiles and leathers containing PFASs. These are like the spray stain preventatives and so forth. And again, Justin put some information in the chat for you, but yes, we can regulate whole classes at a time, and we have done that. Thank you for your question.
Thank you, Rob. And thank you, Peter. Peter says, great. Okay. At the moment, we don't have any questions in the chat. Or rather in the Q&A box. I would like to give folks a couple more minutes.
Another one just popped in, Danielle, another question in the Q&A.
Thank you, Rob.
Sure.
Okay. So this one comes from Nathaniel. He says, California already restricts all PFAS in various product groups via restrictions on total organic fluorine. AB 1817, for example, already restricts more PFAS than Europe in apparel.
Okay, I'm not familiar with AB 1817, and I guess that seems more like a comment. Was there a question related to this? If there was, please go ahead and type it into the chat. Oh, okay, thank you for clarifying.
Nathaniel says just a comment. Thank you, Nathaniel. Okay, we'll give another couple of minutes for folks to add any questions into the Q&A box. While folks are doing that, another friendly reminder, during his presentation, Jesse did mention you can sign up for our e-blast list. That is the best way to stay informed about both our timeline of projects and upcoming events. And we did put that link into the chat earlier, called SCP General E-List. So please take a moment to sign up so that way you can stay in touch with us. Okay, I do see another question in the chat. This one comes from Susie. Can you share the link to the regulatory responses mentioned earlier? A clarification, request for more info versus prohibition.
Oh, yes, Justin, can you, okay, so this is in a section of the SCP regulations called the regulatory response. It's an article in the regulations, actually, relating to regulatory responses, where it spells all the possible ones out. And I don't know, Justin, if you're able to, can you throw into the chat a link to the SCP regulations? If you don't have it, I can get it. And so I would invite you to go to the SCP regulations and to click on the appropriate article and to take a look at it. And if, like I said, if Justin doesn't have it, I can get it. We'll give him a minute to throw it up there. If it's not in the chat by the time we end the webinar, I'll put it in there for you.
Perfect. While we are waiting for that link, we do have another question from Peter. How does DTSC work with other state departments, for example, on data sharing?
Thank you for the question. We actually work extensively with, Justin, sorry, just a side note, Justin just threw the link into the regulations. Thank you, Justin. Again, thank you for the question, Peter. We work extensively with other state departments. For example, CDPH has some laws that they're responsible for regarding cosmetics labeling and things like that and reporting. California Air Resources Board has a consumer product survey that they require manufacturers to provide information to them. We work with them a lot. We work with other states as well, the state of Washington, the state of Oregon. We have a memorandum of understanding to share information amongst ourselves, and we coordinate on a lot of things. And from looking at products that may be of mutual interest to just communicating what we're doing in terms of enforcement activity and those sorts of things. So we work extensively with, and not just with CARB, the Air Board, or we also work with the State Water Resource Control Board. We work with OEHA. Several of their toxicologists review our documents from time to time, provide input, but we also coordinate with them and seek input from them on chemicals that we're thinking of regulating and so forth. So yeah, we have extensive interactions with other state boards, departments, offices, and agencies, other states, and their various regulatory agencies that do work, in a similar vein to this, as well as federal agencies, the EPA, and so forth. We talk extensively, and we collaborate extensively. So, thank you for your question.
Okay, thank you, Ra.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Susie says thank you for the link. Our next question comes from Minthlu. Besides toluene, formaldehyde, and DBP in regular nail polish, do you have any restrictions for ingredients in gel nail polish, which is cured by UV or LED lamps?
First of all, let me just clarify one thing. We, meaning Safer Consumer Products, has only regulated toluene and nail products to this point. We have not regulated formaldehyde and DBP. Those are related to other laws, I think, that restrict certain chemicals in certain personal care products. And those are that law is one of the ones that I was talking about that currently is administered by the California Department of Public Health, I think, or it may be an orphan law. I can't recall just offhand, which means nobody's signed currently to enforce it. So toluene in nail products is the only one we regulate. And you ask if we have any restriction in gel nail polish, and the answer is yes. Our definition captures nail products. It doesn't capture nail polish. It doesn't capture gel nail polish. It doesn't capture any specific thing like that. It captures nail products in general, and they're defined in the regulation. So in the definition that we have, nail polish and gel nail polish are both captured. Toluene isn't restricted in them. Again, we don't restrict anything. When we list a priority product, there is no restriction on that product. What it is a beginning of a process that requires manufacturers to look at whether or not there are safer alternatives to the chemical we list as a chemical of concern in that product. So we listed toluene. We ask that nail products manufacturers look at whether or not they have toluene in their products, and if they do, look at whether or not there's a way to get it out of their products by using something that is safer. That's really what the process is. So I hope that answered your question, and thank you for your question.
We do have a follow-up question from Minthu, who says, so if there's no safer option, can the manufacturer use it?
Well, I'm going to go back to toluene as an example, because that's the one we regulate. If you can't find a safer alternative to toluene, then we'll have to look at the outcome of the process and what regulatory response action we apply in response to the outcome of your safer alternatives analysis. Okay. If you don't participate in our process, then you're in violation. So let's say you think that there's no safer option than toluene in your nail products and you decide to keep using it. That's fine, as long as you engage in our AA process, as long as you notify us and participate in the process and conduct an AA. If you don't do that, then you're in violation, and we would seek to bring you into compliance. And if you didn't come into compliance, we might list that product on our failure to comply list that Jesse mentioned. And if we did that, that's when retailers, who this webinar is designed for, would have a duty to would acquire the duty to comply because the manufacturer failed to do so. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Rob. And just double checking, when you say AA, you mean alternatives analysis,
Sorry,
right?
Yeah, thanks for catching that. The hazards of the trade. Being so comfortable, we always use all these acronyms. But yes, when I mentioned AA, I did mention alternatives analysis.
Thank you. And Minthu sent us a follow-up saying, yes, thank you. Yes, formaldehyde and DBP are under the CDPH.
Right.
Thank you, Minthu.
that doesn't preclude us from considering them. So, for example, we could, if we wanted to, consider one of those chemicals in a product. But the fact is that if a chemical is already prohibited or its use is restricted in a particular product, then that's a product we wouldn't be likely to address, because our regulations are asking them to keep, allowing them to keep selling it while looking for a safer alternative. If it's already restricted, we've already gone beyond, looking for a safer alternative. You can't use it anyway. So we would not probably go through our process in order to address things that are restricted.
Okay. At the moment, we don't have any open questions, but we do still have quite a few folks here with us. So I would like to give everyone just a few more minutes to see if anyone has any additional thoughts or questions that they would like to share. So please take the opportunity to drop any questions and feedback into the Q&A box, or of course to raise your hand. While we wait, I do just want to mention, I know we've presented a lot of information today, so friendly reminder that the PowerPoint presentation and the recording of the workshop are going to be available on the Safer Consumer Products webpage within about 2 to 3 weeks after the workshop today. We did drop the link to the webpage in the chat earlier. It's dtsc.ca.gov/SCP/Safer Consumer Products Workshops Events. So you will be able to access all of the helpful links and review any of the information that you might want to come back to. And as Jesse and I have mentioned, we will also be sending out an email after the webinar is over today, both with a survey so you can share your feedback about the webinar, and all of the helpful links and resources that we have shared today are going to be in that email. So don't worry about trying to capture any of the information or the links. Those will be shared with you.
Danielle, while we wait for folks and give them a few minutes, I'm going to step away for just 1 second. I'll be back in less than a minute, less than 30 seconds probably, but I just have to step away from the computer for just a second.
Thanks for letting us know, Rob. Just checking to see, we do not have any open questions nor hands up. We are, of course, going to wait another minute or two. So please take the time to think about the presentation and collect your thoughts. Type out any questions you have or raise your hand. As a friendly reminder, the options for the Q&A and raising your hand are at the bottom of your screen in Zoom. They are part of the toolbar. The Q&A looks like a little question box, and the raise hand looks like a little hand. And for anyone who joined us by phone, you can press *9 to raise your hand if you have a question. Okay, Rob, looks like you're back with us. We're just going to give it another minute for anyone to follow up with us with any questions. And as we've mentioned, if you think of questions later today after the workshop has ended, you can always email us at saferconsumerproducts@dtsc.ca.gov. And of course, we're going to be reaching out via email. So it's very easy for you to follow up with us if you do think of any additional questions today or later this week. Okay, I am not seeing any questions nor raised hands. So I do want to go ahead and move things over to Rob for our closing remarks today. Rob, if you could give us a quick wrap up, please.
I can. Thank you, Danielle. And first, before I begin, let me just thank Robin Christensen, our Deputy Director, for her opening comments, and thank Jesse for a great presentation. Thank you, Jesse. And then, last but not least, thank all of you for taking time out of your day to listen to us, drone on about your potential role in this process. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your day. We know time is money. Robin said it all when I think she mentioned that we think you share, some of our interests. We think that, most retailers are likely to want to provide the safer products as possible for their consumers. I mean, it can be a point of, of that you can raise to your customers that you work hard to provide the safest products you can. So we think that everyone has an interest in that. And you've heard during Jesse's talk that really this program is focused on manufacturers and them participating in a process, but you can imagine that this is a complex process and that this is a really big universe we're talking about. I mean, we're talking about products and the manufacturers for those products, and we could be dealing with. I mean, we listed tires, for example, and you may not know much about tires, but I can tell you this: there's a lot of manufacturers of tires in the world, right? And so it's a big universe out there, and it's a challenge to get the word out about who we are. And the reality is that communications with some manufacturers, especially ones that are overseas, can be a challenge, and they may not know about us. And so what we typically do is we go out into the field and we buy products and we test them. After we list the products as a priority product, we let some time go by and we go out in the field and we purchase them randomly and we test them just to take a look at whether or not they contain the chemical of concern and whether or not we've heard from that manufacturer. And in some cases, we find that we haven't even heard from a manufacturer. And during Jesse's presentation, he presented a figure that was a pyramid that had manufacturers at the top and retailers at the bottom. And what that really is meant to emphasize is that you sort of form a foundational pillar for this program. The buck sort of stops with you if you want to know the truth. And in other words, what I mean by that is that if a manufacturer doesn't comply, we may we may not be able to find contact information for them. That may be a challenge, and so on. We may ask you to help us reach out to them because it stands to reason that you would know who they are because you're buying their products. And our last resort really is adding products to our failure to comply list. That's not what we want to, that's not the goal of our program. That's not where we want to end up. We really want to be able to communicate with manufacturers because in most cases, when we can communicate with them, they get on board and they participate in the process. And the fact is that if they don't, the duty can fall to you, the retailer. And if that happens, you can either do the AA yourself, which, we don't know how that would work out, you evaluating the safer alternatives, not to mention that is a very time consuming and costly process. So we think that you're more likely to cease ordering because that's the only other option that you have. You can keep ordering that product from other manufacturers that are compliant. You just have to cease ordering a non-compliant product that we put on our list. And the idea behind that is if we can't compel a manufacturer to comply, then, there's a little bit of pressure put on them because they could lose access to the California market. And that's where you come in. And again, we don't want to go there. We want to provide help. We want to, assist people with understanding the requirements and with achieving compliance. And that's really what we're all about. And so we may reach out to you at some point in time. You may see us in your stores purchasing products. We may reach out and let you know we're there and that we're there to purchase products to test, right? And we may come back to you when we do that if we find concerns with products and we can't find contact information up the supply chain. And we're hoping that you'd be willing to share that information with us and to help us out so that we can move ahead, hopefully collaborating with manufacturers and providing the assistance they need to help them comply. And so you really do have an important role here. And we appreciate you taking time out of your day. We invite you to participate in our process. We really, really do, or really would like to see that happen. The more that participate, the better our process is. So, I'm going to leave it at, please do consider signing up for our e-listserv. Some of you probably are already on it, but if you're not, please do consider signing up for it because we will send out information, important announcements when we're considering a new product, when we're considering adding chemicals to our list, when a product is added to the failure to comply list, all of those things, you'll get notifications about when those things happen. And so that's a great way to stay informed and to learn about opportunities to participate. So with that, again, thank you all. Please, if you ever want to talk to us about this program, reach out. You can reach out through the SCP email address that you've been provided. That's a good way to initiate initiate a conversation, and we're happy to meet with you at any time. And the last thing I'll say is just to reiterate that when we do place something on the failure to comply list, I think Jesse mentioned this, but that technically triggers a duty for you, the retailer, to comply. But in reality, you don't really have to take any action until we reach out and notify you. We will do that. If we determine that a product is non-compliant and we put it on our list and we want you, the retailer, to either do the AA or C sorting, we'll reach out and notify you of that. And so you don't have to take any preemptive or action in relation to that. But if you want to, you're welcome to. And again, you'll get those notices, and you may have an interest in what we add to that FTC list, just for the purpose of making sure that the products that you sell are as safe as they can be. So with that, again, thank you so much for taking time out of your day. We hope that you found this webinar to be helpful to you and educational to you. And I think my staff are going to send out a survey for you to fill out at the conclusion. And once you receive that, if you could fill it out and send it back to us, it would really help us. We're trying to make this as valuable as we can for you, the community out there who's interested in this. And so, yeah, please fill out that survey and send it back to us. And yeah, thank you again. Can't say that enough. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Rob, and thank you to all of our panelists and our audience. We appreciate your time and your engagement today, and we hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye.